One is the disruption to small businesses that occurred, particularly in our tourist centers in the Gorge and Southern Oregon and Bend and the like. The issue being, while there were spillovers, particularly with the closure of I-84, we saw a lot of business move to other parts of the state, so it was maybe not such a great net loss, but nevertheless, it was a shock to a lot of small businesses in retail and consumer services and sales. And the problem being, if you lose a couple of months or a month of your income, oftentimes for these places it was in their peak sales season, then they come up with cash flow problems as they go into the lean winter months, or next year when they lose their roof or something, now they have capital problems because they lost the earnings in some peak seasons. And in terms of the numbers that really did hit, a lot of the smoke problem really did hit in the peak seasonal hiring season for a lot of places. In Southern Oregon, the Chetco Bar Fire and the Horse Creek and Millie Fire in Central Oregon it's right smack dab at the peak employment season for our seasonal industries. For the Gorge, it was a little bit after, but still, in the fall, it was still inflated somewhat relative to the typical month. So that's where, you know, the governor's office and the policy folks at the Small Business Association and the like are reaching out, and where there is kind of a role to try to get capital to some of these small businesses to keep them afloat through, you know, past the shock. But more broadly, you know, what we're worried about is, okay, now if it's perceived that we're going to have bigger and more frequent wildfires, and this is going to disrupt our economies, maybe shut down the Shakespeare Festival during the peak season, or disrupt business travels to Oregon, or all the folks that come here in the summer and drive through the Gorge and go hiking and love it and then decide to move back here in the winter when it's rainy and it's completely different, you know, we may lose some of that. So the concern is, over time, our businesses and households are going to be less likely to migrate because of an increased sense of risk. And of course, over time means we don't have data yet, but what economists do is we like to look at expectations through what markets price. In particular, you know, investors do try to internalize the risk of the places they invest in, and that's more of an immediate thing, how these financial markets and bond markets respond. And so the chart I put up here looks at what Oregon municipal borrowers and borrowers have had to pay before and after the fires relative to borrowers in other states. The concept being, if Oregon is now perceived as more risky, well then our municipalities and our districts, public water districts and like, are going to have to pay more money to borrow. But that doesn't seem to be happening yet. In fact, after the fire season, our borrowing rates have actually dropped relative to those in other states. Now, this is encouraging. It shows that, well, it doesn't look like there's a big investor response to these things out there in the data yet, but of course there's a whole lot of other things that go into these borrowing costs than wildfires alone. Which municipalities are borrowing? You know, is it a water district in Harney County, or is it a Lake Oswego school district? You know, these are going to get different rates. Or also what's happening in other states. You know, while we had wildfires, other states had potentially scarier events in terms of hurricanes and flooding and the like, which may have raised their risk premium relative to Oregon at the same time. But nevertheless, at least so far in the real-time data, we're not seeing indications that folks are afraid to relocate to Oregon yet.